Hello everyone. On today's command tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at weapon release authorization and some of the consequences as well as the benefits, as well as how you need to mix it with your doctrine settings in order to effectively employ your units. So our scenario today is relatively straightforward. We're sitting here in lovely New Zealand. I've actually got to travel to Australia. Someday I hope to get all the way out to New Zealand. We were right down here in Melbourne, which was really, really cool. Awesome people, by the way. But that being said, so in today's exercise, we're going to be exploring kind of the right way and the wrong way to approach WRA. So let's go ahead and take a look. So when you first bring up your doctrine page at WRA, you're going to get a menu that looks like this. We've talked quite a bit about this already, so we're going to scoot over to here. So the weapon release authorization is combined with your general doctrine setting in order to decide when a target can fire a weapon, how many weapons it needs to fire, and at what types of targets it can launch that weapon at. Now, you can just think about that for a second and realize this can have a massive, massive impact on how effectively you can employ weapons. Now, one thing that you probably heard a million times is the fact that, masters always study logistics versus tactics. Logistics is a huge piece of this because if you do this well, you'll never run into a situation where you can run out of ammunition and still have nice, juicy targets. There's no kill like overkill. I get that. But in a lot of scenarios, you simply just don't have the time to go back, get new guns, and come back, as opposed to having longer, like a 30-day campaign where you keep going back and forth, constantly reloading. So anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at this. So I'm going to grab myself a classic example of an air-to-air weapon. So what are we looking at right here? The stuff on the left tells us the types of targets we're engaging. This is how many weapons we're going to fire per attack. Now you'll notice here, if we're using an R60M, we're going to use one round against each one of these different types of aircraft. Now you're sitting there going, one round? Seriously? Well, an R60 is not a terrible weapon. As a matter of fact, if you scoot over to the database real quick and you were to type in the R60M, you'd probably notice that its percent of kill is 80%. That is an extremely big number as far as chance of actually doing damage if you fire it within its normal launch parameters. Now, that's cool, except how much damage does this thing do? 1.2 damage. So the default WRA already has a limitation. Even though there's a good probability of actually hitting the target, we might not have a good probability of destroying a target, which brings us to our first major point here. You want to make sure that your weapons per salvo is going to line up with both the percent of chance to kill as well as the actual damage that particular weapon can cause. So in this particular case, you can see, like I said, if it's an unknown contact, just shoot whatever you got. However, if you come down here to bombers and things like that, you'll notice by default, it's only launching a single weapon at them. Now, if we want to get ourselves a fairly typical bomber, let's go get one of these backfire Bs here. You'll notice that they have, let's see here, 20 damage points, which meant if you were to fire this using this WRA, after the first missile hit, the aircraft would have to reattack. Meanwhile, other people are shooting back at the launching aircraft. Now, if this were a little bit earlier and you're launching things like the R3S, you're talking very low POKs. Now, this also applies to SAM units, so kind of keep that in the back of your head. So if you're designing a mission or if you're planning, think about how much damage you have to cause first, then start thinking about how difficult, like I said, it is to actually hit the target. So for example, if I were setting this up right now, I'd probably come in here and set these all to 2 rounds. Keep in mind, you don't need to do this if you're not doing this for specific missions that involve you having to shoot down bombers, for example. Obviously, if it's a reconnaissance aircraft, we can set it to 1 or not configured. Now, one thing you want to watch out for is helicopters and guided weapons. Guided weapons are cool because they come in different flavors, as you know. You have the kinds that attack ships, you have very slow missiles, you have very, very fast missiles, and of course, you have the most terrifying of all, which are the ballistic missiles. We're going to see a little bit of that a little later on. So that is the weapons per salvo. We'll do a practical example of this in a minute. Second item is called shooters per salvo. This basically says how many people should try to attack the target at a time. Now, this is something that backfires a lot, and you'll see that a little later on. Basically, this says that if an air target is engaged with an aircraft carrying an R60M, it will launch a single round at it, but only a single aircraft will attack it. Can you see the problem with that already? Let's take a look at the options. The first one is fire enough weapons from enough units to fill the salvo's requirement. This is actually pretty cool. If you have 3 SA-2 batteries all attacking the same target, you can set it so that, let's say we're firing 3 missiles, that you get 1 missile launched per battery by setting this to this option. Now, if you set it to 1 unit, that means only 1 aircraft is going to fire 1 missile. Now, if you want to have a little bit of fun, you can do something like this. So now 2 units are going to fire 1 missile, which is going to be a little bit more effective, especially if you have that many. And of course, you could set this to 4 units, which is really, really fun to play with if you're using laser guided bombs and you want to kind of pepper something that's very difficult to kill. Keep in mind, I can always do fire enough weapons and set this to 2, meaning either this aircraft will fire both missiles or he and his buddy will fire a missile in order to make sure that those weapon quantities are met. So this is a column we're going to take a look at a little later on. Just be careful because these 2 items feed each other. By the way, a salvo is an engagement, which means if you come back here to the weapon state, you need to think about that. So for example, if I'm carrying 4 R60s and I'm only programmed to fire 1 of them, if I were set to shotgun, that would simply mean that that's it. I only get that 1 attack, even though I have 3 missiles still hanging off my wingtips. So you have to be careful with that. It's kind of a common little oopsie. I've done it a million times, especially with strike aircraft. All right, automatic firing range. If the aircraft is going to attack with this weapon, this is basically the I'm going to fire at it range. Keep in mind, if you're doing a manual attack, you can always attack at max distance. It will ignore this when you do a manual attack, so keep that in mind. So what does this look like? Well, for this particular weapon, you can see we have a couple options here. We have the system default, which is max range. Keep in mind, this takes into account the dynamic launch zone of a weapon. So if the enemy target is flying away, even though they're in range, the aircraft launching is smart enough to know not to fire unless he's actually going to get the missile to the target. Kind of keep that in mind here. Obviously, if you don't like that, watch out for the maintain standoff option over here also. Those will feed each other. And then finally, that's what this column is, finally I should say, over here in self-defense says ignore all this junk and attack at this distance no matter what. So for example, if I were attacking somebody and somebody came out of nowhere, this usually applies to SAMs more than anything, this would be the range to go ahead and engage other targets that are immediately threatening it, regardless of what my regular mission is set to. Think of it as an attack of opportunity. So how does this all play out in the game? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at things from New Zealand's perspective real quick, so it makes a little bit more sense. So I have myself a beautiful Hawk battery, which by the way is going to be an awesome example of how to do this right and how to do this wrong. You'll notice that we have a pretty decent firing area. The goal of this Hawk battery is to protect this airbase right here. So taking a look real quickly, where's the attack going to come from? In this case, obviously, we've already spotted attack aircraft, so it's kind of obvious. But if you were to flip over to the relief layer, excuse me, you will notice there's this beautiful mountain range for enemy aircraft to hide behind, which means if we were to use this weapon at its maximum range, any bad guy with any sense would basically porpoise behind this or even hide in these really, really tight channels using helicopters, making the attack of this Hawk battery useless. Now imagine, for example, that our Hawk battery was located here. Obviously, you can't put the Hawk battery here. This is water. But imagine if we parked him in the middle. Let's actually do that real quick. Look at his range. There would be a million places for enemy aircraft to hide, and he would be wasting ammunition trying to fire at them. So one of the quickest and easiest ways to get around this is to go to your WRA, go to your Hawks, and simply tell it in its automatic firing range to set it to a range less than that mountain range that's already there. Obviously, bombers aren't as maneuverable, but there's nothing stopping me from having a B-52 here. So in this case, I can actually measure that real quick. That's 15 nautical miles. If I intended to use this SAM in this valley, obviously it's in the middle of the water, but this is an example, we could come here and tell it to go ahead and only attack targets at 15 nautical miles away, which means the enemy would be well within the kill zone before we fire. That's really, really important. Another point I want to say too is one of the cool techniques here is you can actually, if you have a system, let me go borrow something really, really scary. Let's get an S400. Let's say we have an S400. We'll get the big one. That looks pretty good to me. Look at the range of this. Keep in mind, the curvature of the horizon kicks in right here, which means half of this range would be wasted even though they're active guided weapons. A smart player can actually do one of these kind of things and waste the entire battery's ammunition with no danger. So what you can do is you can set the doctrine settings with the WRA, like I was just saying, to a significantly shorter distance. Actually, we don't want the A, we want the B. There we go. Instead of doing all 200 miles, we could set it to 50 nautical miles, which would now mean that any aircraft that is within range has nowhere to go, even if it was a very, very fast aircraft that attempted to duck behind the radar horizon. So this is a great way to prevent you from wasting ammunition. Obviously, in this scenario, looking really quickly, if I did have this system here, I don't think it would have a lot of value ordering it to attack any targets probably past this mountain range over here, unless I knew I was dealing with ballistic missiles or something like that. So kind of watch out for that as well. That's a common mistake. Even in our little valley down here, it's probably worth leaving him alone. Now, another point I want to throw out really, really quickly while I'm thinking about it is when you're doing your WRA, make sure that the kinds of targets you're engaging make sense. So, for example, these are guided weapons. How many missiles is it launching at a guided weapon? The default is 2. Okay, how accurate is an IHawk? Let's go take a look real quickly. We need the weapon itself. Let me borrow that real fast. And it's a 65% chance. So let's see here. Small missiles have a size modifier of minus 25, I think, and they also have a speed modifier of minus 15%. So 65 minus 25, what are you going to end up with? About 40 minus 15. That's not cool. That's a 25% chance hit per missile. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm really determined to attack a guided missile with a Hawk battery, I'm never ever going to hit it with just 2 rounds. You're going to want to go ahead and change that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to change that because it's going to make things interesting. Keep in mind, you need to balance the need of running out of ammunition with the need of protecting itself. Now, a lot of classic legacy batteries, once they get attacked by modern things like HARM missiles, for example, you're going to have to get as many shots off against the targets that are actually dangerous. As a matter of fact, what I will actually do in that situation is I will order the SAM battery not to fire at guided weapons and only attack targets that are valuable. Keep in mind, in the Vietnam War, towards the end, the SA-2s, the S-75s, were ordered to only attack bombers and leave everybody else alone because those weapons were so valuable and they were running out of them. So kind of keep that in the back of your head. I'm actually going to leave this at 3 because it's going to give us a good example in a little later on. Okay, looking pretty good. So now let's go ahead and click that layer off. And we're going to see what happens when we do this right and when we do this wrong. So right now I've got myself a pretty good sized strike package on its way to this nice little airport here. It's made up of Sukhoi 24Ms, and they're escorted by Sukhoi 24Ms. And they also have some, I believe they're Sukhoi 27s. Yeah, kind of bringing up the rear in case we're attacked. Pretty standard strike package. Now the way I set this up is pretty standard. I grouped them to missions. I set it all up. I made sure I'm only attacking stuff that's valuable. Set it all up online, and I've left the WRA alone. So these bombers are going to attack things the way that they want to basically do by default. Let's watch what happens. I'm loving this new times 15, by the way, in case any of the devs are watching, which they're probably not. By the way, weather's on our side today because we can get above the clouds to make identification of us more difficult. Of course, look at how bad timing this is. And we're being launched at. Oh boy, one of you groups is supposed to have the anti-radiation missile. What are you doing? What are you doing? So these guys are only like 50 feet off the ground. Obviously, an IHawk is not the greatest weapon. You guys gonna fire back at that? Or are you just gonna sit here thinking about it? Oh, we lost an airplane. Oh, they got one of the bombs off. Oh, geez. By the way, always suppress your enemy targets with seed missions separately from using them as escorts. Otherwise, you get this embarrassment. Oh, watch this, watch this. It'll launch 3 missiles at that. Oh, maybe not. Ha ha ha, I shut his radar off. Ha ha. Hate it when that happens. Alright, let's continue with the fireworks. I think we got one of them. And we're dropping some bombs, dropping some bombs, dropping some bombs, doing a little pass, and I believe they're all heading back to refuel because the distance to Australia is a little bit longer than I remember it being. By the way, you're noticing that these guys are basically just kind of hanging out and doing their thing. All right, get out of here. Go, scoot, scoot. All right, let's see how well we did. Well, we got the Hawk, which is good. And it looks like we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hits. And total damage, let's go ahead and take a look at losses and expenditures. Let's see here. We got 3. We didn't. Oh, we got a hangar. We got a hangar. And we also got quite a few aircraft. So it actually wasn't that bad of a run. Now, if you think about it, though, how many Sukhoi 24s dropped how many sets of bombs? Which brings me to my next point. The default WRA for all bombs is going to leave you attacking with every unguided bomb you have on the deck, coupled with attacking as many as needs the salvo requirement, which can leave you with a situation where bombers will come in and all attack the same target. If the bombers are in tight enough groups, what will happen is they will spread out to individual targets, but if you're interested in spreading the wealth, so to speak, the default WRA simply does not work. So I'm going to go ahead and reload the mission real quick. There we go. And switch back to not Anzac. Looks good. Let's see, our aircraft are no longer en route because that was just an example. So let's go ahead and see what happens if we do a similar mission, but this time we adjust the WRA. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new mission. I'm going to call this Strike It Again. Strike It Well. We'll set this to Land Strike. And I happen to have a big pack of these Yak 38 Forgers, which is actually going to be really helpful for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all these guys. I'm going to go ahead and throw them in groups like this, and I'm going to make them in sections of 6. You're sitting there going, why are you making them in sections of 6? The reason I'm doing that is because I want to make sure that there's enough of them so that when they drop their bombs, they do it simultaneously. And this will make sense in a minute. So actually what this really is Strike at Runway. So let's go ahead and create a new mission. We're going to call this Strike. Instead of Runway, we're going to call this Strike Hangars. Go Land Strike. We'll go ahead and grab my unguided weapons. That looks pretty good right here. And now here's where your trap starts. If I set my sections to be single aircraft, I'm going to end up attacking the same hangar 12 times. If I set this to sections, I'm going to end up attacking it 6 times. Why? Well, if you take a look at the doctrine, these aircraft are programmed to dump their entire stack on the first thing they see, which means the first thing they see will be attacked, not killed, and then the next group will come in and attack the exact same thing, which is going to get frustrating fast. So anyway, let's continue setting everything up. That looks pretty good to me. Go ahead and create one more mission. Oh wait, I never actually added anything on the map. Let's go ahead and add that to the map real quickly. All right, we don't need the runways, obviously. Remove selected. Let's go ahead and get rid of all this. Obviously, we wouldn't normally be attacking things like this, but again, this is just for an example. Let's go ahead and get that to that. Move you. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. And then last but not least, let's create one more mission. Strike, let's be TOO. Go ahead and do Land Strike, and now let's get our precision-guided munitions. Going back to my strike at hangars. So like I was saying a minute ago, if we just attack, we're going to end up destroying everything in the corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mission Doctrine. How much damage does your average hangar actually take? Well, if you actually go to the database real quick, go to Facilities. Let's say Hangar, medium aircraft hangar. How much damage does this thing take? 600. Keep that in the back of your head for a second. Fab 500. Whoa, it's a fab. There we go. How much damage does this cause? 319. So it takes 2 bombs to kill a hangar. Keep in mind accuracy is an issue here, so we need to keep that in mind. However, if we just damage the hangar, if there's anything inside of it, it's going to get splattered. Which means that when I plan this attack, instead of dumping your entire stack on each hangar, I'm going to order it to drop 4 rounds. Now, if I just pressed this and walked away, I'd only be attacking a surface contact with 4 rounds. No good. You want to make sure you set the land type to the actual thing you're trying to kill here. So I'm going to set this to 4 rounds. Runway facility. I guess it is technically a runway facility. It looks good. Looks good. Looks good. Okay, let's do mobile target. I don't think we're going to attack any mobile targets. Now, how many shooters are we going to want to use? If we do fire weapons to meet the requirement, there's a good chance they're going to come around again and maybe attack the same target. So what I'm going to do instead is come down here and tell them to only attack with a single unit at a time. Do you see what I just did? That means I've increased the number of targets that are actually going to be attacked. Obviously, Yak 38 is not the most precision-guided platform for unguided bombs, but it'll demonstrate my purpose. I don't need to change my automatic firing range. Jumping back to my runway, folks, I want to make sure they're really, really big groups. By the way, how big of a group should I attack then if I'm going to try to spread everybody out? In this case, you can shrink it down really, really small. So I'm going to knock this down to groups of 3. Of course, if we do groups of 3, that means they're going to be attacking in little splurts. So I guess I'm going to go back up to 4. Let's see, strike at runway. Obviously, you need big groups attacking the runway simultaneously. And then the strike targets of opportunity. This particular group, I can put these guys in very small groups. Actually, I'm going to up them up to 4 just because I want to attack simultaneously for maximum morale effect. Not that that matters. All right, we're going to be targeting all of the ammo and all of the gas at this particular airport with these guys. All right, looks good. So since these are precision guided munitions, and AS-10 to be precise, how many are we needing to use here? So let's go to AS-10 real fast. The default is to launch 2. If we go down to land structures, the default is also designed to launch 2. You're going to notice something new here though. Inherited targets missile defense value. What's the missile defense value? Well, this is where things get a little complicated. Let's go get my Hawk real quick. You're going to notice all air facilities have something called a missile defense value. This refers to how many missiles of this type it's expected to take to target a building. Now, since we're attacking buildings that can't shoot back, if we allowed this to go as it's set, we'd end up firing a whopping 11 missiles into a Hawk battery. Now, if I grab my hanger real quick, this one's programmed to 4, which would mean I'd be launching 4 of my AS-10s, which are very expensive weapons, by the way, and I don't have an unlimited supply of them, which would be a complete overkill of an attack. So therefore, this system is really, really good if I'm attacking like ships or ground targets like tanks, but it's almost useless against these fixed, non-defended targets. I'll show you another demonstration of that in just a second. So to me, that means, okay, so how much is it going to take for an average ammo revetment to actually do damage here? So we'll go back to facility, we'll do AMO. I think it's ammo revetment. 2, which is actually not bad. What's the damage points in this real quickly? Damage points. Why can I not see it? You guys are all looking at there. It's right in your face. You can't miss it. There it is, 300. How much is an AS-10-2? I think this is one of the few times where it actually works the way it's supposed to be. Let's take a look. An AS-10 does 140. Oh, so it's actually going to take 3 missiles to blow up a revetment. Ah, they caught me. But at the same time, it's important that you approach things like that, especially if you're using LGBs. So let's go ahead and set this to 3. And I'm going to leave it to fire enough weapons to meet the thing. Again, this is just having to get around this because my targets are so darn durable. All right, 333. We don't need to use missile defense. Fire weapons. Yep, that looks good. Runway facility. Notice this says don't use it against this weapon type. We need to use 3 because that's how much we're going to need to kill the ammo. Again, it's not a runway facility. I'm just doing it because I'm lazy. Now imagine for a second the AS-10 did the equivalent of 1,000 damage. If we attacked it at its missile defense value, we'd be doubling the amount of damage we actually need to cause. Then we could scoot through here and set these to 1 unit at a time, meaning when this group attacks, they're going to be shooting out a blitz of missiles all over the place. And I'll show you kind of a fun way to play with that later on. Okay, so I'm actually pretty happy with that. Everything seems to be pretty much all set. My section sizes are the size. My targets of opportunity, I can actually up this to 6 because remember they're going to be launching and helping each other out with the attack. That's looking good. Refueling support's looking good. Everything's looking good. I'm actually going to pause. Now, let me bring you to another issue you're going to have with the WRA. So I'm going to get myself a MiG-25 BM real quick. Yeah, that's the one I'm looking for. And I'm going to get myself a KH-58. This is a spectacularly long-ranged anti-radiation missile. I'm talking a legend. So if I order this MiG-25, I'm actually going to order him to go over here. He's probably like, I need to return to base. Not enough fuel. Not enough fuel. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Let's say I wanted him to attack the radar station on the top of this hill. Keep in mind, he's got a long flight to get here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do one of these things. So a search radar. How many missiles does it take to kill a search radar? Well, according to him, it takes 1. So if we were to click on the search radar and check the missile defense value, you'll see it says 1. Not bad, right? So now that missile's on its way. It's going to go cause some trouble. I might as well go have him engage whatever this radar is over here. Why not, right? So 1 missile launched, no problem. Now what happens when he goes to attack this radar? Take a look here. 2. Does it take 2 extremely expensive, high-tech anti-radiation missiles to kill a single search radar? Last I checked, no, it does not. By the way, good doctrine review there. Notice it was not able to attack that target because it was too off to the side. I had to tell it to move first. So now watch what he does. He fires 1, he fires 2 at a search radar. Why are you wasting these expensive missiles? So one of the ways you can get around that is if you're on the Doctrine page and you had the KH-58 as one of your options. Let's see if I can go find my KH-58. I hate it when they do it by the NATO names. That just gets confusing. Ah, there it is. You'll notice that it only has one option for attack, and that's the target's missile defense value. You can turn this up, you can turn this down, you can say only use 1 round, less rounds. You can even do something weird like this, where you say 1 round, but you have 4 people fire missiles at the same time. It's just important that you consider that, otherwise you end up wasting an awful lot, or not. Now, one thing that we didn't realize, or I realized, or you realized, is the fact that this area is actually protected by a Hawk battery. And if you remember how we set it up, granted we reloaded our game, it's going to shoot these missiles down. So in this particular case, it was actually worth it to have a weapon release authorization to do. Oh, it did it anyway. Nice job. Okay. Thank you for your help. You can go home now. Oh, we still got one left. Wow, I feel bad wasting it. Let's go find somebody to shoot at. Oh, that looks pretty good right there. You can do that on your way home. Let's try to get a waiter out lock on him. There he goes. All right, now you can go home. Thanks for your help. Okay, let's see how things go this time. Of course, keep in mind, we didn't do any dedicated seeds, so that might make things a little bit trickier than they're supposed to be. When you do unguided bombs in very, very large groups, like groups of 6, you have the advantage that you're basically going to blitz the target. Let me show you something really cool and subtle while I'm just kind of thinking of it. If you click on a unit, believe it or not, you can change this formation. If you were to go up to the formation editor, pull that out of the way, you can actually set the location of each one of the aircraft in this particular group so that you can do something like a trail formation as an example. So like I could do something like this. Now this is super powerful if you want to take the time to micromanage every single unit at the same time. It's just worth noting that it's a neat little detail that a lot of people miss, that's all. Okay, let's see how we did this time. Keep in mind that weather is obnoxious. Keep in mind there's still a very angry Hawk battery down there. Speaking of that angry Hawk battery, let's go get that Foxbat back again. I need to borrow it for something. The Hawk is a special case because, as you probably know, American systems designed for engaging enemy aircraft tend to have 6 or 7 radars, as opposed to the Russian method of basically having a search radar, a height-finding radar, and a fire control radar. As a result, the missile defense value on the Hawk is also very, very, very high because it has so many individual radars engaging simultaneously. The reason I'm sending this guy down here right now is because he desperately needs to help us out with any of the missile batteries that are going to try to take a shot at us. Can I do a bearing launch with that? Oh, that's lame. What's his altitude? Why are you up so high? Get back down. Down. Get down. Down. On a sign, go down. All right. Now notice, these are all the guided weapons, and they're all firing simultaneously. And they're attacking separate targets. But there'll be exactly enough so that each target engaged gets hit with the requisite number of bombs. Oh yeah, that was nice. Ah, that's what I was waiting for. Who's shooting at us? That one right there. Turn yourself around and attack. Keep in mind, I don't have good anti-radiation missile protection here. And I really wish he would do his deed with his harm there. Uh-oh. Meanwhile, our bombers are doing their thing against individual targets, doing exactly as much damage as they need to do in order to be effective. Alright, he's going to come tooling around here at low altitude. Actually, I need to bring him up to moderate altitude. Otherwise, he will not be able to engage those targets. Here comes the next round. Wish that one had a cannon or something. That'd be super helpful. So these guys, notice, separate targets. And they dropped exactly enough bombs to do the deed. Now, if these guys were to come around and re-attack, what they would do is attack the same target over and over and over and over again. All right, coming through. All right, unfortunately, he's attacking the same target because of the fact that this target is not listed as destroyed yet. Here comes the next round. These guys are extremely low on fuel. Here they go. There goes the runway. Notice they attacked as a big group, and I don't think every one of those aircraft is going to get back to base safely. Oh boy, that's not so good. And here comes my next 2 rounds. I'm actually going to manually drop the damaged targets because we don't need to put any more damage into them. This is why you want to attack with a big group simultaneously. Here comes my next attacks. Nicely done, boys. Nicely done. Here comes the next attacks on the runway. Nicely done. Nicely done. And here comes my next large attack against ground targets. Of course, my MiG-25 keeps zinging back and forth. Notice they all attack separate targets, but they do enough damage to the target that did engage. And they're all launching together, launching at the correct targets. Oh, it's beautiful. This is almost unfair. Okay, now I'm going to show you the fun spam thing. So hopefully that makes sense as far as how to address this issue. So now let's say, for example, that we wanted to take this to the nth degree, which is exactly what I intend to do. All right, you need to go home because you don't even have enough fuel to, like, walk. All right, get out of here. All right. So let's switch back to Anzac real quick. I'm going to delete this one really, really fast. And I'm going to go ahead and switch back to, not Anzac. I'm going to add myself a B-52. You could probably see exactly what I'm doing here. Looks pretty good. And let's do something nice and funny. Let me see here. Those are JDAMs. That's 12 of those. I was really hoping for more of them. 45. Nice. So I'm going to tell him to attack with 1 bomb per target on his way down to this area. Watch this. All right. I want you to fire a single bomb per target. You can see exactly what's going to happen. This works, by the way, very well if you have cluster bomb units. All right, looks good there. Looks good there. Looks pretty good right there. All right, looks good. Looks good. I don't think there's any submarines, so I'm not concerned about that. All right, so I'm going to order this aircraft to drop down to medium altitude, and I'm going to give him a simple order. Attack that airbase. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Go switch to this view. Go ahead and line myself up as neatly as I can. So what's going to happen is, because he's only allowed to drop 1 bomb per target, as he makes his pass, he's going to drop them all. Of course, he wasn't able to drop 100% on account of the fact that he can't drop them that quickly. But look at this. He's going to do it again. Is that cheating? Oh, I love that. All right, you can go back to base real quick. We'll go ahead and take a look at what happens. Look at how much damage we did to so many individual targets with a single bomber because we ordered him to only drop 1 bomb per target. All right, hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you have questions, throw it in the comments. Kind of try to give you some general little tips as far as kind of general rules. Again, remember to combine your doctrine settings with your WRA settings. The other thing you've got to remember is when you're doing missions, they can have a different doctrine in WRA than your general forces can. So it's really critical that you get that right the first time. Otherwise, you're going to have some issues. I'm sure you're curious about this, so we'll take a look. Notice they lost nothing except all these beautiful buildings and aircraft. We, of course, lost a bunch of Yak-38s. Probably most of those ran out of fuel, unfortunately, and this is your total expenditures. Pretty impressive, if you ask me. So again, that WRA has a huge impact on it. One thing I will say in passing or slash leaving is don't forget that when you're making your attacks, if your settings for your doctrine under weapon state is set to do a single attack, you're only going to get 1 missile launch. So kind of watch out for that. And also, for those of you who are looking for how many missiles should I fire at a modern target, one thing I always say to do is if you go to the database, we'll get something really, really bad. Just to quickly show you guys this. We'll do an S75M. We'll take the F model. What's the POK here? I think it's decent if I remember right. What do we got for PK? 35%. For those of you guys who want to look for another way to approach this, you can always do a probability calculator to events into Google. Let's see what this one's like real quickly. So we could say a 0.35, and it's a 0.35. Calculate. This would mean that if we fire both, let's see, or is the one we're looking for, that's still only a 58% chance to hit with only 2 missiles. So if you're sitting there going, well, what if I want to try it a little higher? Well, you could do this. Let's try it for 3 missiles. Now you'll notice that the probability becomes 72%. So in those situations, just fire 3 missiles. It's the only way you're ever going to be able to damage anything. All right, hopefully this video was entertaining. Enjoy.